I'm Michael Hirsch. I'm the chairman for South Bay Musical Theater, and what we've been doing over these last months is started up an East Studio, and we are producing 8 to 12 programs a month, coming to you from all different types of programs, trying to keep us all connected until we can do live theater again. And then we'll probably keep a lot of this up as soon as we go live again, because it's been so rewarding and successful. So with that, thank you, esteemed panelists. We've got lots of questions that have come in from the audience already. I have some that I thought I'd ask, and of course, I'm very interested in particular what's been going on, because each of you has a separate kind of expertise. And I thought you would just give a quick summary maybe of who you are and kind of what you've been, where your focus is, to give our audience a little bit of context. Erin, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor. Like Michael said, I'm in Northwest Ohio. The bulk of my clients that I see for therapy are couples. I do work with families as well. I run a practice, so I have 30 therapists and we work together. So my aspirational goal for 2020 was to stop seeing clients so I could help my other therapists. But then in March, we had a wait list of 50 couples. And so I took 20 of them, and that's what I've been doing all during COVID, is sitting at this desk talking to couples in their homes on Zoom. So yeah, lots of marriage and relational things have been happening, as you can imagine, and have probably experienced over the last half year. So that's kind of what I've been up to.
That's perfect. Thank you for that. And thank you for your work in particular. Juan Pablo.
Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm in private practice here also in Menlo Park in Silicon Valley. And I see people of all ages, really, from young children through later adulthood, and see individuals, couples, families. And yeah, I mean, I run the gamut in terms of the kind of work that I do, but see a lot of people who are obviously very stressed right now. I work with trauma. I work in a lot in consultation with other organizations, communities, schools. So I'm very like systems thinking when I think about, like, you know, families and you know, all the different factors that are kind of going into into people's lives, and how to kind of just find a way to not just cope, but to thrive in whatever small ways that we can. Also a certified mindfulness teacher, so I've been really using a lot of that lately with my individual clients. And I haven't been able to get mindfulness groups restarted. That was going to be my goal in March, actually, when all this hit as well. So my plans got shifted. I was going to do a podcast and do all that stuff.
Well, now look at this. You get to share some mindfulness with everyone today.
Right,
Maybe that can get you back on track. And Yvonne, how about yourself?
Hi, I'm a licensed clinical social worker with a credential in people personnel services, and I work at a local school district, Santa Clara Unified School District, and I'm a wellness coordinator. Our school district has an in-house school-based counseling program, and I'm basically tasked with tending to the wellness needs of students, the adults, be that the families, guardians, and also staff. And we're trying to address basically wellness needs across the multiple domains. And so that involves direct counseling program for students, family support in terms of, you know, presentations, workshops. And then for the staff, we provide a lot of training, trauma-informed training, mindfulness, and of course, staff wellness activities, because we realize that in order for our students to benefit from support, we need to support the adults. And so in a nutshell, that's what I do. I'm currently working at 2 elementary sites.
Excellent. Thank you all. So that kind of gives our audience a little bit of perspective of some of what your specialties are. But what I wanted to kind of start with, and this is a musical theater company that we've invited you into. And so, of course, Yvonne being my wife and me also as a performer and part of SBMT. That's our connection. Juan Pablo here's wife is a performer in the South Bay, also for South Bay Musical Theater. And Erin and I actually used to do shows when we were teenagers together when I lived in Ohio. So there is a connection, and all of them have a love for musical theater. And so they know you people out there and have been one of you. And so they get it. But one of the things that I wanted to cover just kind of right off the bat, because it's one of these recurring themes I kept hearing, which is, gosh, over the last months, dancers saying, I haven't been dancing, singers saying, I actually haven't been singing, and it's their love, and they're not doing it. And I'm wondering if you have a perspective. What are they experiencing? How can you put a name to what they're going through, given everything we've been going through in 2020? And I'm happy with any of you answering or not answering, but love some perspective on that.
Sure, I can give it a stab if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, this is absolutely the central theme, I think, for so many people who I work with. And, I think we're all in a little bit of a hibernation. We're all just trying to survive in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of that's appropriate. So, the fact that we've scaled back a lot of the things that we used to do, that's okay, right? So I think the first thing is just we all need to have some permission to lower our standards, especially those of us with really high standards. We need to bring that back to just scale it back. I mean, there's just not the same level of input, same level of flexibility. The dopamine isn't there, right? I mean, part of what drives us is social interactions, is seeing people in person. And we've lost a lot of that. So, we are not firing on all cylinders. So I think that's the first thing, is just to give permission that some of that's okay. And I think the second thing is, we're all also in this hibernation period, really figuring out what's important to us and what is it that, we have to reconnect, what matters. And there's a lot that's being challenged in our world right now around that. A lot of things, a lot of fracture lines are being not just revealed, but really expanded. And so there's a recalibration that's happening, I think, in our culture. And that's hopefully not going to be a bad thing if we can be really thoughtful about what we want to bring in. So I think it's also an opportunity, before we start expending all this energy that we don't have, that we make sure that we're actually doing it for something that really matters, that can be sustaining, that can be integrated into whatever's coming next, because who knows what's going to come next. So I think I just want to give everyone a little permission first, right off the bat.
I think you just let a bunch of people off the hook that have, feeling bad about that, and that it's perfectly okay. You guys have anything to add to it? That was pretty good.
It was good. I mean, I just to add to that, I think, as mental health professionals know, loss of interest in an activity which you had previously enjoyed or loved is a typical symptom of depression. And so it's super normal that at a time where you're experiencing so much emotional distress, physical distress of not being able to sleep, of not eating well or eating too much, as many of us have turned to that maladaptive coping skill, that it's normal that things fall off your radar, things that you used to love, because you're in survival mode and you're just trying to get by. I actually was with a client today, and we were talking about dissociation, just that idea that sometimes you get so overwhelmed, it's like you're not even in your own head or your own body. And everyone experiences that at some point. A really typical example is when you're driving for a long time and you think, did I pass that yet? And you don't even know, because you've kind of not been in your own body. And we talked about how it's a coping skill. And I mean, it's very mammalian, that part of your brain is still there. And there's a number of animals that play dead when they're overwhelmed or scared, and they just shut down, check out. So I think it's a really typical coping skill, and it makes a lot of sense, and it's a great way to preserve energy. It's not fun, and those of us, like Pablo was saying, the high achievers, the type A, the go extroverts, aren't used to that. But giving yourself grace for what is a totally natural reaction is a great idea.
Giving yourself grace for a natural reaction. All right, I'm on board. But you kind of mentioned, the stress of all of this and things, and one of the things we also have is a lot of parents who have kids that are doing distance learning, and this is extremely difficult, especially if they have a job. It's difficult on the teachers, all of that. Is there any, and it's going to be this way for a while, some people are trying to go back and then are having to go back to distance learning. And I know, Yvonne, you in particular deal with this every single day. Is there any advice you give to parents or to students dealing with this?
So I think along the line with what Pablo and Erin have shared, which is that, this is a really tough time for everybody, and to acknowledge that, there's a collective trauma going on, right? And so we're going on the 7th month, and without knowing what's going to happen, living with this uncertainty has taken a toll, right? And so particularly for parents with little ones or adolescents at home, it's just to recognize your own stress, for the adults, just to take a pause and say, you know what, I'm stressed out too, I'm overwhelmed. And then from there, figure out how to stay connected with your children. I think what we want to do as adults is to regulate our own emotions and to recognize it so that we can model it for our kids. And I think what maybe we're taking for granted is that we're sheltering in place, but that doesn't mean that we're connected necessarily, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're all in the same space, depending on how much, space you have at home, but I mean, you're trying to work from home, or maybe you're an essential worker and you're on the about, but, given the new routine, if you will, not everyone is connected. And it does take that extra effort to, step up and show up for your kids. So I think I would say to the parents, you're doing a hard job. This is difficult. Parenting in a pandemic is nothing that we have anticipated. And so again, just to give yourself a lot of grace, like what Erin was saying, and, to figure out what are some of the tools to manage the emotions, to stay connected with your loved ones in the family, and then to figure out what is the new routine, make something predictable so that we can continue to navigate and show up.
So to kind of carry on with that is one of the things that's happening, is people have a lot more time they are spending at home, but not necessarily connecting. They are doing some of this playing dead or sheltering down or dealing with the grief of this or the depression or the lack of normalcy or habitual behaviors, or everything is out of whack. How can they best use their time? What are ways where they can better use their time? Do you have recommendations, or anyone really?
I mean, I would say for sure, if you can find times where you get everybody off screens, they don't even have to interact with each other, but I think we all need a break from the constant staring and scrolling and checking out. So kind of just taking like an emotional temperature of the house and kind of checking in with everyone, but giving people, especially if you have tweens and teens, giving them the space that they need, because they don't always want to interact, right? Typically don't want to interact with parents, and having the heart and the good sense to let them have their space and not force them to interact. I think it's just about honoring what people need, because as many have said in the last few months, there are some introverts that are really loving the fact that things have slowed down and they finally get to have some peace and quiet. And so I'm sure the last thing they want is to be like engaged in a nightly Uno championship. Like, they're good in their room with their books, right? But recognizing which of your kids or partners, like who in your life, what they're missing or what they need, because some people are struggling more than others, and some people are, kind of living their best life.
Yeah, I know a couple people like that. So
yeah, I love, Erin, that you're mentioning that we all have different needs in this time and in this space, and that there's different ways to meet those needs. There's a kind of a weird effect, I think, with all the amount of Zoom that I'm seeing, particularly with young people, adolescents as well as young adults, but adults too. There's just a lot of burnout. Particularly, I think it's hard for the younger teens to just constantly feel like they're being, recorded or watched or, observed, even when they get to have the camera off. And yet, like, that's kind of the replacement for the connection that they're being asked to get, right? Which is so critical and so important for them and their development. So one of the things I've been suggesting to a lot of young folks is to find kind of other informal ways to like kind of hang out, because that's really what we've lost, right? We've lost the ability to kind of just like go down, to the place where everyone's hanging out, or by the lockers, or after school, or in between classes, or in the quad or whatever. We've lost all those informal spaces. There's some replacements for that, but they're really far and few between. So the one that I think a lot of people around here in Silicon Valley are using is Discord. So Discord is like a chat app that also has like an audio voice over IP.
And what's my nice kids are there. They're there.
Yeah, great. What's nice about the voice over IP is it doesn't have the same video demand. So there's not the same expectation of like, you have to be on. It's just kind of like being in a cafe. And that, even just like knowing someone is there, even if you're not talking, you're doing work, really can produce that similar sense of connection without the same cognitive load and demand. So that's something that I've seen that's been a semi-decent replacement. But then also just finding ways to have socially distanced time outside, walks, doing what you can to get out get outside. Even if you're not walking with somebody, if you get outside at the same time every day and walk around your neighborhood, if you can walk around your neighborhood, you'll see other people who are walking around your neighborhood at the same time. And even just that like similar nod of like, hey, I see you. We both walk around, at 7 o'clock or whatever. Even that can just kind of start to create some kind of normalcy and some rhythm. So,
I found
it's not a full thing, but we'll take 10% at this point, right?
I've got the guy who I see every morning when I'm walking the dogs, who every morning, he didn't say anything at first, and I'd always, give him the hand. Now he's like, hello, like every morning. So I know what you mean. Even that means a lot to have just that little connection.
And I think can add to the, in terms of looking at your own needs, when we talk about wellness, we have this idea of the wellness wheel, which I don't know if everyone's familiar, the audience members are familiar with that, but basically it's just dimensions of, because we're beings with needs, and, they depend on which wheel you're looking at. It could be 6 to 8, but basically we're looking at, the physical needs, the emotional needs, the social needs, spiritual needs, what's your environment like, your intellectual needs. And so when we look at this time that we're sheltering in place, and, we do have a bit more time now, right? Because we're not rushing to and fro. And so I think to use this time to kind of, figure out what your priorities are and which areas have you not been able to tend to or may have neglected. And then, look at, being more intentional in terms of getting those needs met. And I think Pablo and Erin both mentioned just figuring out what is important, what do you have the energy for, and to set the intention and I can't emphasize that enough, to just set the intention to take better care of ourselves and try to get our needs met.
So I love that, because what if there's someone that we suspect is not having their needs met, whether it's family, friends, that have maybe are feeling some of this depression, and you're concerned about them. What are the things you look for? What is something that you can do? Like, everyone feels the compulsion to do something, but they sometimes don't know what. What are things to look for? Any advice on that?
I mean, I would start by saying that what I've been saying to everyone just off the bat is, hey, how are you? And everyone says, oh, good, thanks, I'm great. And I say, right, but really, how are you? And they're like, not good. So, like, everyone says they're good and they're not, right?
So you're basically giving them permission to tell you the truth.
Yes,
let's get past that.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
And knowing that, and what I usually say to people is, what's the good and the bad right now? And that gives them a chance to hopefully, find something good to talk about, but also be able to share with you something that's not going well. And of course, the simple, basic, but super powerful skill of validating someone. And so when someone says like, I am really struggling, I can't get out of bed, I'm not doing my laundry, I just am not doing well, that, you don't invalidate them by giving them suggestions or telling them, well, you've got a lot to be happy about and you've got a really good job still, you're lucky. Just saying, wow, that sounds hard. And, or what are you doing right now to work on it? Or is there anything you need? Or just being a listening ear. Really, everyone can be a lay therapist. Like you don't need a master's degree and a license to be a good listener and validator.
I love that. I love that as a suggestion.
Completely agree, Erin. I mean, validation is such a difficult skill. I think when we all start, as therapists, we all start with the stem of like, it sounds like, and then you just repeat whatever they just said. The thing I teach parents of their teenagers is like, when your teens come to you and like, it seems like, oh my God, I have this really clear, obvious answer for them. What I want you to just repeat after me, just say 2 words, that sucks. Right. And you just keep saying that sucks. Oh, that really sucks. You find different ways of saying it. And a lot of times that gets you pretty far, because what I have found is most people actually know what the solutions are for themselves. And what they need is that sense of connection. They need that accompaniment, right? And that's what then produces that motivation. So humans, when they are connected, are motivated. It's when they're disconnected that they're not motivated. So it's not like they don't know what to do always. It's just that they don't always necessarily have that, again, that dopamine, that connection, that purpose. And that's what we can provide when we validate, when we spend a little bit of extra time, when we linger with that uncomfortableness. I love that, Erin, when you were saying, like, how are you really? Right. My standard response is, shit's so weird. This is all just so weird. And then oftentimes like people, come up with like, yeah, oh my God, yes, this is how it's weird like lately. Because it just, again, it validates like how bizarre this is. This isn't normal. And that's okay in the sense that this is our reality. It is what it is.
Love it. All good advice. Are there, so I think you're right. That's going to probably satisfy 95% of the people I think you talk to, having that validation, giving that permission to go ahead and connect and share, that you're opening up to have that connection. For people that are in not so good a shape, are there resources locally or nationally, or what are things where do you start with helping out in that way, or is that appropriate? Like you said, many people know what they have to do. Just that connection might be enough. But if you suspect that, or anything, what steps might you take? Talk to people like you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to give answers, but I want to give other folks a chance too.
Oh, how nice. No, go for it.
Okay.
Love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think first just asking about, if they have anybody to talk to, who help them to identify who their resources are, if they have a doctor that they trust, who can maybe do a referral, if they have a friend who, is a therapist, right? I've gotten so many calls for referrals of late, and I'm happy to field those. I always try to give people a call back. For people who are in really dire straits or who may be suicidal, there's the National Suicidal Hotline, which is 800-273-TALK, 273-TALK. There's also now a text suicide hotline, which is really great actually for teenagers, because a lot of teenagers will not call. And so it's you text HOME, HOME, to 741-741. So if you have a concern, that somebody might be suicidal, it's okay to ask them. It's okay to say that, hey, are you feeling suicidal? Like, are you feeling really bad? Like, do you think you might hurt yourself? Do you need help to keep yourself safe? It's okay to use those words. It's not planting, an idea in someone's mind. The research clearly shows that. So if you have that concern, just voice it. And a lot of times it can be a huge relief to people. And those numbers give great resources to help connect people. You can also always just Google in your county, Google your county name and then type in the word mental health access. And there's oftentimes an 800 number for the county that will help direct resources. So you don't need to know everything. You just have to find the people who do know.
Yeah, that's great.
I think there's also a lot of benefit in following up with people, because it's easy to say like, hey, you should talk to someone. And then someone goes, no, you're totally right, I should. And they're not going to do it, especially if they're super shut down. So texting the next day and just saying, hey, you seemed like you agreed that maybe you needed to talk to someone. Have you made a phone call yet? Like, do you need a number of a place? Like, I'd really be happy to help. I know what it's like to be super shut down and feel like you can't make the next step. Like, is there a way I can be helpful? Because it's so easy to drop the ball. I mean, we all do it, right? Just kind of like you plant a seed and you walk away, but to follow up and see if someone is doing what they said, or like even with my own therapy clients, I'll say, I have a suggestion. It would be like, what if you tried this? Or what if you tried this? And I say, you can think it's dumb or you can think it's great. What do you think? Instead of just dropping it and leaving it with them. And if they say, I don't like it, I say, oh, well, let's think of something else. And then when they find something they do like, I say, okay, so we agree that would be a good idea. And it sounds like you're saying you want to try it. I say, great. When do you think you'll try that by? Like getting a commitment out of them. So you're going to make a phone call. Cool. Well, can I follow up with you later in the week? I'd love to just check and see how you're doing. And so kind of helping people follow through when they're struggling with follow through.
That's great. That's great. I love that. Perfect. Anything want to add to that? That's lovely.
Is that my cue?
Well, no, not at all. Just.
I agree. You just make sure you're checking in with your peeps, right? And having honest conversations like, hey, I think that it's time to bring more people to this village to support you, and I'm here for you, but I'd like you to talk to, professional, or, it doesn't have to be a mental health professional. It could be someone from their spiritual community. I mean, anyone that they feel connected to, and you can just, again, just checking in and making sure that they're following through and showing that you care. And I think just removing that stigma of accessing help, because basically no one should struggle alone. And all we really need is that space to connect with someone and just figure things out, right? We're all works in progress, and we just really need to just harness whatever it is, be it skills or, just new ways of trying to just solve life's problems.
I love it. So that's great. These are great ideas, and I think everyone can benefit from those. And if someone's doing much worse off, ways to access more resources or ways to approach and help people through these so you can stay connected is lovely. Oh, what I'd like to do is, I have so many things I'd love to ask you about, but I want to make sure I cover some of the things that have come in through some of our surveys that we sent out to people. So one of them that has come in is, this is really interesting. Can you suggest any strategies for dealing with skin hunger, touch starvation, while maintaining good social distancing practices? That's a tough one.
It is a tough one. I think things are a little bit different maybe in California than Ohio right now. And I think it's like that everywhere, where there's pockets where schools are open or are not open. And so I feel like here we might not be quite as shut down right now. So we are sometimes seeing people. But what we've chosen, at least my family of the four of us, is that there are a couple other families that we're close to. We call them our family. They're our friends who are our family. And so we've decided, like, we all protect ourselves out in the world, but that we can get together as long as no one's been traveling or exposed, obviously. But trying to create a community of people, a small community that's safe. Pets are also great for touch. I mean, that is such an awesome physical way to connect with another warm being. But I also think there's something about, I run a morning group, and we're doing like a lot of body work. So even things like literally holding yourself, finding muscles where there's tension, massaging your own muscles, putting your hand on a part of your body that's like sore or stressed, and like just doing energy work. There's ways I think you can, you know, creatively try to meet some of those needs. I'll be curious to hear from the other two about if you have ideas, because I think that's a tough question.
Well,
Yeah.
I love the pet one. I mean, I think we have experienced a lot of that.
Hugging the goldfish.
Not the goldfish. I'm not talking about the chickens in the backyard either. I'm talking about these little fur babies, as my wife calls them.
Yes. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, like everyone was saying, you know, it takes effort and it takes some courage, but you reach out and you try to find what they call quarantine pods, right? Exploring that and really having honest conversations about everyone's risk tolerance level, you know, because number one, safety, but really just to have those conversations. And I think in my talks with people, I think that conversation, sometimes it's hard to initiate, right? And to really talk about what's risky and what's not, and being honest. And so again, I think you want to reach out and start having those conversations and start building those pods, because we don't know how long the situation will last. And I think piggyback on that, you know, fur baby talk, you know, if you're not in a space to, you know, own a pet, but let's say you don't have allergies and you do have the space to have a temporary pet. I mean, right now shelters are overrun with fur babies that need foster, you know, and usually I think when you're fostering pets, the medical and the food bills are taken care of. They really just need some humans to take care of the, you know, dogs or kittens. And I think there's other exotic pets as well. But anyway, that's one thing to try if you don't currently have a space for a long-term pet. That's an option.
That's lovely. That's great.
Yeah.
Pablo, what were you going to say?
Yeah. Well, the pandemic pod thing is a tough one. The Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley, that's ggsc.berkeley.edu, has a really fantastic guide on developing a pandemic pod. It's actually really great. It's based on a lot of research that originally was coming from, funny enough, the sex positivity community, around developing boundaries, around, you know, good communication, clarity as to what the expectations are, you know, what are the comfort levels. And, you know, some different places are going in and out of levels of quarantine. Santa Clara might be actually coming up into the orange tier now soon.
Yeah, soon.
So, you know, our norms are shifting, our ideas of what we understand is shifting. And it's just, I think, being creative and paying attention to what works, you know, for you. I have a teenager I was working with, and we started off from really thinking about this loss, this really real inability to contact, you know, with her friend. And we came up with was pool noodles, right? Where they can use pool noodles to like kind of like poke each other and just have some kind of feedback. And, you know, they're just very playful and they just want to be able to play. And so I think, you know,
that's great.
Just instilled a huge amount of hope for this person. So, you know, that might not, pool noodles might not work for everybody, but it comes from paying attention to, okay, what am I missing, and what does that really mean to me? So we just try to do what we can.
Another really simple idea, which is something I do all the time anyway, but if someone doesn't, you can add to your routine, is just physical care, like dry brushing your body. You can buy like special brushes that you brush your skin to like exfoliate and stimulate your skin, and you could take the time to like put on lotion or creams and like rub out your own muscles, like just being able to spend that kind of pampering time, like honoring your body and like just giving yourself time, I think could be valuable, and a way to get that physical touch too.
Awesome. I have never considered what it is, stippling your skin. What was that?
It's dry brushing. It's just
dry
it's
brushing your skin.
Like a stiff bristle brush, and apparently you're supposed to brush towards your heart, like on your body. So, but it's really stimulating, and it would be good for someone, especially who's alone and has really got that desire for physical touch, I think.
If you're a high feedback person, you can also cup your hands and just kind of go along the meridians of your body and kind of give yourself a little kind of pat. This is a great way to wake your body up, you know, up and down kind of the side channels of your body, inside, outside of legs,
Mm.
gently on the stomach. Can do fists on the back. So those kinds of things can also be very invigorating, can kind of wake you up a little bit. If you Google like Qigong or Chinese medicine type stuff, there's lots of this kind of stuff on YouTube, lots of different, activities to kind of just enliven the body and have self-contact, even if we can't have that interpersonal connection.
Those
And
are
you
all
definitely
great.
can be like massaging your own hands, your own feet, do facials. Like there's ways that I think you could work that in.
Fantastic. I have another one that I wanted to cover. People are, one came in and says, what are ways to connect as a couple when all the stress is coming in and getting in the way, whether it's, dealing with the kids, unemployment, financial issues, just dealing with household stuff. You mentioned, I think, Erin, I'm just getting the laundry done. What are recommendations for couples that you
Well, since that's my thing, I'll start. But I'm sure they'll have other good ideas. I mean, one of the first things I think is like find a way to let your person leave the house alone and get away from everybody. Like that might be the nicest thing you can do, especially if there's little kids constantly hanging on everyone and having all the needs of food and toileting and bathing. Like constant caregiving is exhausting. So I think if you could help create space for your partner so that they can escape, even for, like we were saying, a walk, like take the dogs, just go stand outside. Even in Ohio where the weather's about to get really ugly, I'm like, you can put on boots and a coat and a hat and you can still go outside, right? But I think that's one of the greatest gifts you can give someone is, and even if it's just they lock themselves in the room and it's like, everyone stay away from daddy or mommy needs a break. That can be helpful. Helping that person replenish so that they can come back to you renewed and everyone's not like at a level 9 of stress, I think would be really helpful. And then as a couple, carving out time for yourselves, which again is super difficult to do with kids, but where there's a will, there's a way. You can put on Frozen and give everybody, everyone can have 5 things of fruit snacks, whatever. Like just to give like mommy and daddy 20 minutes of uninterrupted time just to talk about things that are not who's picking up who, when, who's laying out what food to defrost for dinner, but like connection, like how are you doing emotionally and where's our struggle and what do we need to be doing and what are we grateful for with each other right now?
Love it. I love that. Giving fruit snacks.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so hard to carve out those times, and I think particularly for the stay-at-home parents who are also doing the teacher duty. I mean, it's such a huge cognitive load. So whatever we can do to kind of take some of that burden off, to open up some cycles, to create some space for their own like being, to be their own person. I think, Erin's really hitting it on the head. And to be able to coordinate even with other couples. So like in our neighborhood, there's 3 or 4 families who we kind of do some like social distancing, hanging out with, and we'll do the dads for an hour and a half, and then we'll switch to the moms. So the dads like will be with the moms will be with the kids the first half, and then they switch, right? So you can even coordinate that ways with with some of the folks that you may have in your neighborhood to be able to kind of swap out. That's worked pretty well when we can all get on the same page about it.
Very good.
Yeah, so basically I think it's important to just, make it a priority, right? Because there's competing priorities right now, competing attention demands. And, if it's important to you as a couple to make that a priority and then set the intentions to actually taking care of each other or allowing time for, one person to take care of their own needs for now, like Erin was saying, just giving that space is important. And, making a priority, number 1.
I think one of the best things you can do if you're partnered is on a daily basis, COVID or not, is just say like, hey, is there anything that you need from me or that I can help you with today? Like it's just because that's what being part of a partnership is offering yourself in service and support to someone. And just, the ask, I think, is significant.
You're right. That is just a year-round, yeah, pandemic or not, good thing. That's a healthy good thing. Someone had written in about, and if you have questions here live that maybe you haven't already put in, feel free to put them in the chat. No problem, we'll get to those as well. One of them was around just the feeling really inadequate. I have all this extra time, and yet the chores don't get done. The paperwork doesn't get done. I have loads of extra time and I'm feeling inadequate. What do you say to someone who's experiencing that? I think you've touched on it in some ways.
Well, I think, yeah, at the beginning of the conversation, we had talked about, giving yourself permission to just sit with the uncomfortable feelings, whether you're feeling sad or feeling angry, the whole range of emotions, all emotions are okay. And just to then say, okay, you know what, I'm going to give myself grace. There's all this to do, but if I'm not getting to it, maybe it's not that important. Maybe it's not on my priority right now. So I think to take that time to reflect on what is important, because if it's important and you set the intention, there's greater likelihood that you'll get to it. So I would say, just give yourself grace and stop beating yourself up. If laundry is not your thing, maybe, let it go for a few days.
Yeah, I think it's a particularly difficult question to answer if there's been a loss of job or connect, like identity, or inability to access, your profession or your community. And I think, it's hard. I mean, I think that it really requires like in some cases, a reworking of like, okay, well, I was doing this thing and now I can't do that. How do I then go and meet these needs that I still have, right? Whether it's financial or otherwise. There are obviously, there's a hierarchy, right? Like, got to pay the rent. But like not assuming that, that there's a financial crisis. I think it can also be important to reassess what one's values are, right? And to go back to, okay, I chose this thing that I was doing, and I was spending all this time doing this. Why was that important to me, right? What was that? How was that fulfilling to me? And oftentimes there's like some other resonance that, we can then take to another task or take to another place. And so reconnecting with those things that, kind of broadly and abstractly matter to us, what we sometimes refer to in psychology as values, right? It can be things like love, integrity, connection, compassion, creativity, all these, they're kind of big things. They're more, a little bit more nebulous. They're not like goals, like, graduate from grad school or make $1 million or buy a house or whatever. Those are very tangible goals, right? And so that's it gives you a little bit more freedom to be able to say, okay, I was doing this job where I was feeling great because I was really connected with others. How do I find another thing that helps me to feel connected, even if it's not the exact same thing?
I love that.
I also think that if you're really struggling, that it's worth, and it's hard to do, but the only way we get good at difficult things is practicing, is to reach out to people. And whether you are comfortable in a small social media circle to say, hey, I'm just gonna be vulnerable and put this up for an hour and then I'm taking it down, but I'm not doing well and I need help. And like seeing who says, I'll help you, what do you need, right? Like, and so, yeah, like say my house is trashed and I have 3 kids and I'm too overwhelmed. Like, it is hard to ask for help, especially Americans, right? We're just so conditioned to be so independent and not to be vulnerable, be tough. So it takes a ton of bravery and strength to be vulnerable. But I always tell people, because I think I just had someone say this today, I don't want to be a burden and I don't want to be the person who has to ask for help. And I said, well, don't forget, you're giving other people an opportunity to serve someone, and people really love helping people. And so, that's how we're connected. And someday you will be helping someone who needs help too. So it's hard to do, but if you really are struggling, it's worth trying to practice being vulnerable and asking for specific help.
You're right. Asking for help is always hard. I have someone had written in that they're very type A, but no, I'm thinking, let's get my glasses out here. But, they have people in the family that are not. And so how can you help myself to pull back on criticisms to them for not living up to these expectations, right? So for someone who's used to working at this level and dealing with those, that's apparently can be a problem. Any words of advice for that?
I think it's about adjusting your expectations and, recognizing what is within your control, what is outside your control, and what's within your control, how much influence do you have, right? And so this applies to how we're viewing the current situation and also your relationships with those around you. I think, basically adjusting expectations that would lead to, I think, less conflicts perhaps, and less frustration perhaps, but at the same time, you do want to take the opportunity and, I think check in with each other and talk about what are the expectations, now that we're in the situation we're in, how do we establish a routine for our family, whose job is it to do what, whose turn is it to take a break, whose turn is it to have fun? I mean, I think, again, it's just adjusting expectations and then having conversations about what's going to work for everybody.
And that kind of reminds me of conversations that, we've had just about, there is the amount of grace and the amount of accountability, and how do you balance those? And that's kind of that struggle. You want to recognize, you want to have grace with that. At the same time, how do you make sure they're accountable for what they're working on doing?
Yeah, I think Yvonne's onto something when, we're talking about these standards, right? Of like, well, it's really about why are we doing it and what is it serving for us? And I think sometimes for those of us who have very high standards, it can sometimes be that we're seeking order, not because it's efficient or because it, serves our family in some way, but because it's a reflection on ourselves. And I think that's the trap sometimes is, we can be really judgmental of others because we're secretly judging ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a hard thing sometimes to recognize when you've been practicing that a long time. But it's an important question, to ask yourself, like, okay, well, why do I want it this way? And just because I want it that way isn't enough. I mean, I think it, it really needs to be, I think it helps to have an inquiry of, okay, well, what is this really doing for me? Like, how do I feel when this is orderly, right? Well, I feel relief, or I feel, just so. And again, that could be, an aspect of control, right? Of like wanting to feel like you have some control in your life when there's obviously lots of things we don't have control over. Putting the dishes away just so is not going to really change COVID. So there's a way we can let go of the dishes that also lets us let go of, and be able to accept that this is the situation that we find ourselves in. Not that we're giving up, but that we're allowing that situation to be difficult, right? We're just being present with it as opposed to pushing it away or trying to, change it in some way. Lets us see things more clearly.
As a type A person who has high standards, I think for sure the goal is, like, lower your expectations, emotional management. But while you're working on that and messing it up, may I suggest becoming a highly proficient apologizer? I just did it like an hour ago to my kid, where I was like, wow, I really kind of freaked out because this is how I'm feeling and I'm getting stressed out. And so, yes, I was probably being too harsh, and I apologize. I didn't mean to kind of lose my cool. But if you can get really good at apologizing and make it a habit, you start to, I think, lose shame, because you start going like, wow, I just mess up all the time. Okay. And you can give yourself so much more grace because you do mess up all the time, and you become proficient at acknowledging how often you mess up. And then you just become so much nicer to all the other people out there who constantly mess up, because everybody's messing up all the time. And then I think it can help kind of get you in a place where you can settle down a little. But, if you really have high expectations, sometimes we jump a little fast, and then you got to back a track with an apology.
That's A+ parenting right there.
I'm working on it. I always say I should have become a therapist well before I had kids. They only benefited like half. So they got like half of a great childhood and half of a messed up one.
Yeah. Teaching kids how to own up to mistakes is, I think, the hardest thing. And the research really clearly shows that, that growth mindset we love to talk about with kids, we've been preaching this for like years, 20 plus years now, of like, have this growth mindset. Apparently that doesn't give people a growth mindset. What really actually seems to be driving that ability to give people a growth mindset is how their parents viewed mistakes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they view mistakes as a opportunity for growth, or as some moral failure or some fault? And so, you're taking the former, right? Of like, okay, I screwed up, mea culpa, right? Like, this is what's going on, and this is what I'm trying to do, and it's not about you. And I think that gives everyone more space and more ability to grow. So even in this hard time, I think this gives us a chance to really show our families how to deal and how to show up in the world. And lots of mistakes happen in our house too. Mostly speaking.
Not here. No, we know all about that. But I love that there's a certain respect and empathy and connection that happens when you do that. So I love it. One of the things, to kind of bring it back to some of the theater stuff, is we talk how people are a bit depressed and not able to do some of the things that theater is about. It's about rehearsal and discovery, and it's active and it's expressive, and for many people, it has ceased completely, and it's hard to get motivated and deal with those things. One person had kind of written in that, I would love to see myself doing these things again. I can see myself doing these things, but I can't motivate myself to get there. I think right off the bat, there's just an acknowledgement some of those things you can't do safely with other people right now. How does the person deal with some of this?
I feel like, Pablo, you said something earlier that this kind of mirrors, but this idea, like when I couldn't do theater and I moved to Toledo where there's no professional theater, I had to think, like, boiling it down to its lowest common denominator, what is it that I love about this? I love working with creative groups of people who make something bigger than all that we could all do individually, and something that's dynamic or storytelling, crafting something larger than life. And I thought, well, there's got to be other ways to do that, right? So finding those ways, I talked, because this is a theater audience, I thought you would appreciate this little insider scoop. So I don't know if any of you know who Alice Ripley is. She was in Next to Normal and won the Tony. I messaged her a little bit ago because we're friends, and I said, hey, can I tell them like what you're doing? Because I think it's super interesting to hear what some of these truly, I mean, they are full-time actors and this is their job and has been for decades. And she has kind of channeled this energy where they were like workshopping Anne of Green Gables to go to Broadway, and it shut down. Wow. Which is heartbreaking. It would have been hopefully it will still happen, right? It sounds like it'll be a good show. But she has been looking for like things to do with her time, and she's been doing like live feeds and singing. And she came upon, and I think this just speaks so beautifully to the resilience and creativity and ingenuity of artists. But she found an online site where she's doing art and using her graphic art and turning it into clothing and wallpaper and bedspreads, like just finding some other way that she can like channel all this creative energy. And then I also talked with Timothy Hughes. He's was in Hadestown.
Hadestown, yeah.
Yeah, and he was guy. The Greatest Showman. Yeah, he was the strong man in The Greatest Showman. Yeah. And we were just messaging today, and he was saying something about, I probably won't find it fast enough, but he's doing some online program where because dance is his thing. Yeah. the performerspuzzle.com, where he's like teaching people things online. So I think it's, at least as an artist, my thought is, yes, give yourself time to grieve, be sad, be in that space. But then when that, like, you know, we're going to put on a show comes back to you and you want to do something creative, like, you have to start thinking about ways that you can channel all of that creative energy into something totally different.
I hear you. I think that's what we've been trying to do with our e-studio. We never really had conceived of all the things that we'd be able to kind of do with this and accomplish, and to watch people learn new things and step up and create and connect has been very fulfilling. And I love that we've been able to do that.
To piggyback off of what Erin's saying here about how to do this process, because it's not always obvious. It really starts with sadness. And, you know, we're doing a lot of avoiding of everything. That's what the eating is about, with the, you know, reorganizing the entire garage, right? Recocking everything in the house, you know, these little projects and stuff. They're all fine, but, you know, it's important to spend some time, right? And to not feel it all the time, certainly, but to create some space to allow it in, you know, and I use this term acceptance, which I think, creates some hackles for people of like, well, I don't want to accept that this is how it's always going to be. And I think that, you know, it's a really poor choice of word. That's why I like allowing better. And sometimes when we think about acceptance, it's like, well, I have to agree that I'm okay with this. And I'm not saying that. I love to say, fuck you to coronavirus, like all the time. It's a daily phrase that I use with people. But we have to, you know, acknowledge, right, and allow the consequences of all that to be there. So when we create some space for sadness, it lets us know, okay, what we've actually lost. And that's what's going to be that guide, you know, towards that next step. Sometimes we can recoup some of that. Sometimes we can just wait and delay. But there's other things that are just going to go away. And so we have to think about, okay, what was that doing for me, right? Like, how do I get some of that back? And that's going to be a different answer for everybody, right? Whether it's, you know, using your body, or having something to look forward to, or having a place to go on Friday nights, or, you know, being inspired, right? Or being able to cry, you know, in the theater, or being able to see people, you know, just be more than themselves. And there's ways maybe to recoup some of those things in different places. I mean, there's no one right way for all of us. I wish there was a magic bullet I could just, you know, drop it in. Funny enough, for me, it's Dungeons and Dragons. You know,
I might know something about that.
Yeah, you know, something I haven't gotten to do in like 20 plus years, and it gives me something to look forward to every week. Gives me a way to be creative. Gives me an escape, because, you know, I deal with reality all the time, and I'm totally good with that. But I need that like alternate reality too. You know, I need that escape, and so for me, that's what I really reflected on. Okay, well, what is it that I'm really wanting? And I pushed pretty hard for that, as Michael can attest.
It worked,
and I'm pretty good. I'm a little type A about it.
You were good,
but I get my needs met.
And I thank you for the motivation.
You bet.
Yvonne, what were you going to say? I know you wanted to step in.
I'm just echoing everything that's been said so far. You know, at this time, it really, I think, yes, you want to sit with that grief, sit with the uncomfortable feelings, and try to navigate the uncertainties. And at the same time, you know, start reimagining, you know, what is meaningful for you, right? I mean, as artists, you want to express, you want to, I mean, I guess when I was just thinking about a parallel where, you know, the theater shut down, right? So same thing with the school system, the school building is closed. Yet, you know, at this point, even if we're sick of Zoom calls or Google Meets or whatever, we do have technology. And I've been impressed with how your organization actually has pivoted. You know, you harness the technology and you started reaching out to your peeps and just trying to figure out, how do you navigate? How do you find new ways to connect? And so, you know, same thing with the school systems, wherever they're at in terms of reopening or hybrid or whatever, people are figuring out new ways to navigate. And again, I think it's about, finding your purpose. What drew you? What's your passion? And then also think about what are your gifts. Even things change, it's outside of your control, but your gifts are still there. So what is it? What is it that keeps you going and keeps you want to just get up every day and just, keep plodding along? So, I think we've talked about Brene Brown, who's a researcher on vulnerability and shame. And, she has many worthy quotes, but one that I've been just throwing around at people is just that, joy, simple joy, collected over time, it fuels our resilience so that when hard things do happen, we can, cope with it and have the emotional strength to deal with whatever stress. I'm paraphrasing at this point, but it's just the idea that, now there are a lot of things outside our control, but what we can hang on to, I think, are the simple joys, the little things that we used to take for granted, but now we actually have to really set the intention to accomplish them, whether it's just, simple walks, or, joining a webinar, or, tuning into a eStudio production. I'm just thinking, there's just a lot of ways to, I think, reclaim some of the things that we've lost along the way.
I love the idea of simple joys and being mindful of them and being grateful for them. And that, I think, is what we all need to do, because I think we're going to be doing this for a while. And so ways to connect, ways to find those simple joys and be grateful for them. I would like to thank my panelists. You guys were just wonderful. You have very different kind of areas of focus, and I just feel like you covered all of these so well. And I feel inspired, and that's a lovely feeling. Thank you to our audience for attending tonight. We appreciate it, and I appreciate your questions and some of the resources and things. I'll see if I can get those posted so that if people have questions or need to reach out to anything, you all gave wonderful resources. So we'll see if we can get those posted. Thank you. Erin, I'll let you get to sleep. I know it's late. Pablo, you probably have to drive home. Then, sweetheart, the kids probably have to go to bed, huh?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Hey, can I plug something really quick that is
Sure.
totally a free resource that you can add to your site? It's 7 a.m. Eastern, but I have a replay on my page. I run a group called Manage Your Shift. Yeah, learn how to manage your shift. But every morning at 7 Eastern, I do 30 minutes of like affirmations, gratitudes, meditation, journaling, stretching. It's a women's group. So if there's enough, feedback from guys, I can have a guys group if they really want one. Okay. It's mostly because we show up in our pajamas and we're kind of a mess. But if anyone's interested in checking it out, it's a totally free resource. I started doing it at the beginning of COVID just to get myself out of bed every morning because everyone was staying up late and sleeping in late. So if anyone's interested in joining us, I'd be happy to have them.
That's lovely. There it is. Now that's 4 a.m. for most of our audience here. But hey, no judgment on when people want to get up and do stuff. You want to get up at 4 a.m, get motivated to go, there you go. Or, attend one or two, see what it's like, and start your own, whatever it is to do. But I love that idea. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And they can watch the replay later when they want to.
There's a replay.
Yes.
Solved. Thank you. Everyone, thanks again for attending tonight. And I'm sure we'll see you back in the eStudio in a few days. I think we have... there's something almost every night, it seems. My God. All right. Thank you. Have a good night. Peace to you. Look for those simple joys. Thanks, everybody.